So Deathloop is a new one from Arcane Lyon, and it's all about killing people to break the time loop you found yourself in. So you wake up on a beach with no memory, with someone called Juliana goading you over the comms, and it's your job to investigate the area, line up 8 specific kills in one day, and then hopefully you're going to be able to escape this living nightmare. Well, Deathloop is a really interesting game. You know, gameplay and mechanics aside, simply from a publishing angle, this is an interesting one. So this is a PS5 console exclusive, created by Arcane and published by Bethesda, who are now owned by Microsoft. So given the deal was done before Microsoft bought Bethesda back in 2020, plans have stayed the same. But I don't think it's going to be too long before we see Deathloop on Xbox Game Pass, but for now, you can check it out on the PS5 and also the PC too. Well, Arcane is known for creating their rich worlds with stealthy mechanics and a series of abilities, and Deathloop feels like a culmination of sorts, taking elements from Dishonored and Prey and taking the best bits and producing something with a really tight narrative, great feeling gameplay mechanics, plus you throw in the mix the time loop elements and you've got yourself a great feeling game, and it draws you back time and time again. Now at its core, this is a first person shooter and allows you to pick your path through a series of set piece levels, allowing you to stealthily creep up on enemies or go in all guns blazing. But whereas in previous Arcane Lyon titles you would have been at a significant disadvantage to ignore the stealth, here you aren't faced with too many restrictions. So yes, you can sneak up on pretty much everyone and kill them, and you are going to be doing a lot of killing in this game, but usually you can fight your way out of a tight spot with a gun as well. I do think it's a smart choice as it's going to open up the game to the masses. However, the drawback is it can feel a little bit easier and you can feel kind of handheld and led through much of the game. So you play as Colt Van and you wake up on a beach with little memory as to what's happened before, and you slowly piece together what's going on through a combination of notes, artifacts and Juliana, who's constantly insulting you down the comms. So Deathloop is set on an Arctic island which is stuck in a time loop, and it's been created somehow by 8 visionaries, and they are the key to the loop. Patrolling the island at all times are members of the cult called Eon, and they've been given clear instructions to shoot you on sight if you get spotted, so it's definitely best to keep out of their way. So it's your job to track down and kill all 8 visionaries in a single day, and thus break the loop. And while you're getting your bearings in this world, you also have Juliana to worry about, as she can invade your game at any moment's notice and hunt you down, so you do have to keep your wits about you at all times. Well, in the early hours of the game, it is a little bit tricky to get to grips with what's going on, so there's plenty of characters to know, weapons and loot to learn, as well as the environments to map out. So I would say don't worry too much about this early on and push through that slight sense of confusion, as things will open up and all become clear with time, and you'll get to grips with the environments, the time of day and all of the loot mechanics. You know, the game is meant to be played over and over, so if you don't quite know your way around at first, don't worry, it clears up quite quickly with experience. And this isn't one of those games that's going to get good after 20 hours, it is much quicker than that, but saying that, I did find the beginning was a little bit more confusing than most. So the world you inhabit is a really stylish one, inspired by the 70s, and it's a hedonistic murder island crawling with cultists, and they are looking to kill you. So Arcane have done a great job building up the world, from the detailed environments with the artifacts all over the place. For example, you've got notes, audio messages and computers to kind of dig into or hack into, and the world building here is fantastic and really brings Deathloop alive. So if you're a fan of Dishonored, then you're going to feel right at home in Deathloop. So the main difference here is you have guns and gadgets, and early on in your playthrough you're going to pick up a weapon, as well as something called a hackamajig that allows you to interrupt these security signals and generally mess with your enemies. So as you make your way around the areas, as well as the cultists you have to deal with, and they've got these massive guns, there's also automated turrets everywhere that simply point the hackamajig in the right direction, and now it's yours. There's also cameras everywhere as well, but again, the hackamajig really helps you out and you can turn them off remotely. Well, there's a pretty good array of weapons, including pistols, automatic weapons, rifles, and they all feel really, really good to use. So Destiny is normally my standard of gunplay, but the guns in Deathloop really feel like they've got weight to them. So Arcane have even taken inspiration from Destiny and other loot-based games by adding in different rarities of weapons, so there's a decent incentive to come back and take on bosses time and time again because of a chance at a drop for some loot. Well, at the start, you are going to lose everything when you die or the time loop when it resets, but as you progress through the early hours, you're going to pick up the ability to keep a few weapons through new time loops, so you don't have to worry too much about losing that great drop you just picked up. But it does cost currency though, so do spend it wisely. Complementing the weapons are items called slabs, and they are augment, and you can use them to modify your abilities. So visionaries tend to have these slabs, and as you kill them, you're going to pick up more powerful abilities as you tick off these bosses as you make your way through the game. For example, Shift is a slab that you pick up from a visionary called Charlie, and this is similar to something called Blink in Dishonored. This is a short-range teleportation ability, and it comes in really handy when you're fighting everyday enemies. Nexus is another really useful slab in Deathloop, and allows you to chain together enemies. So basically what happens to one of them happens to all, and that is going to really come in use, especially when you need to kill 8 targets in a single day. These slabs, they're all really powerful. However, there's nothing really new here from Arcane. Most of the slabs we've seen before in Dishonored. Arcane appears to have made a significant effort to make this game quite easy to pick up and play. For example, your power bar regenerates rather than having to find potions or items to recharge, allowing for ease of use when it comes to abilities. So on one hand, it's great for beginners, although later in the game it does feel like Deathloop is holding your hand just a little bit too much. Now, early on in the game, I was really thankful for these techniques, especially the reprise slab, and that gives you 3 lives and room to make some mistakes. Now, I think if the game had started off too hardcore, then many would be put off, but thankfully later on in the game you can turn off waypoints and other hand-holding systems, and that gives you more freedom to explore and also more freedom to make mistakes too. So these are small tight little loops that you'd experience in something like Hades, and it is different in Deathloop because individual playthroughs can take hours at a time. One clear benefit of this slightly easier difficulty is more freedom to express yourself with solutions. So for example, you can play very stealthily, sneak up on everyone and take them out in silence. Or you can simply let your guns do the talking, and it's very highly likely you're going to manage to shoot your way out of a situation and get back to safety without too much bother. So early on in Deathloop, I was playing a big stealthy game, being careful not to set off alarms or disturb enemies too much. However, I found out after a few hours into the game, I could actually go into an encounter with a gun, and about 8 times out of 10 I could shoot my way out. Personally, I'm not really accustomed or really enjoy stealth games that much, so this was an absolute revelation to me, and it allowed me to enjoy Deathloop that much more. So time isn't on a constant progression in Deathloop, as the name might suggest. So the day is split into quadrants, and you can play these out in various locations. So you start off in the morning, you go into an area through a network of tunnels, and when you come out, time will progress. There isn't a constant timer counting down or slowly moving the day forward, so there is room to breathe and explore the area in quite a lot of detail. So it does mean, however, you are going to have some crafty ways to get the visionaries together, given the limitations and the numbers you have to kill in total in a single day. So as you play through the various leads, these opportunities will present themselves, so it's fun uncovering the clues and the overlapping story points. For example, 2 of the visionaries are lovers. They've been sneaking off to the beach for a little bit of hanky-panky, and that seems like the perfect time to bump them both off. Well, there is a certain amount of progression between loops, whether you finish the day or you get killed, so there's a handy screen on your inventory where you can save notes, and you've got clues that you find scattered about the island. For example, things like door passwords. But early on in the game, you're going to find out about something called Residium, and you can use that to infuse weapons, and therefore carry them from loop to loop. And it makes the first few loops pretty tough as you're figuring things out, how it all works and fits together, but it certainly makes things easier as you progress. So slabs and trinkets carry forward too, trinkets being upgrades for your weapons, which can increase aim assist or reduce reload time and other various things like that. So Deathloop is a game that you're going to master over time. There's a couple of phases to the story. So first of all, you're going to be killing all the visionaries and collecting their powers, and then second, you bring all the elements together and you find out the origins and the purpose of the loop. Now, it's all pretty complex, but the game is brought together really well with great writing and expressed through the characters and the NPCs, but also the environments as well. So the Eon cultists stumble around drunk most of the time, and that really helps you when they're chasing after you with a gun, but it all plays into the hedonistic, violent backdrop of the Deathloop sandbox. So you've got 2 main modes in the game. You've got Break the Loop, which is everything I've described so far, where you play as Cult, or you've got Protect the Loop, where you get to take your chance and play as Juliana to go and hunt down Colt. So not too long into the game, you will notice that Juliana jumps into your playthroughs and you are online by default, meaning random people can come into your game and mess with you. And it does make things tense because once you see that notification that Juliana has entered your game, you could be in for a hard time, especially now the game is new and the player population is large. For example, I was all the way through a loop into the evening when a random came in and killed me, and I was so close to the end. I hadn't killed all the visionaries at that stage, so it wasn't really wasted progress, but still, it was quite tough. Well, playing as Juliana and jumping into a random game is a big appeal of the online mode for me, as you can really do some damage and mess with your friends, or you can mess with randoms too. Set traps or simply run in there and gun down Colt, or you can snipe from a distance, and you can mess with the locks to the mines, so Colt has to hack his way back to safety. There's plenty of ways to mess with Colt in the PvP focused mode, but I have heard reports of people turn this to friends only mode, and you can also turn it off so you're not online, and Juliana is AI only, which does make it much easier given the AI in the game isn't that hard at all. So one thing with the online mode to take note of is you can't pause it, but when you're offline and Juliana is AI, then you can pause. So if you want to do that and you want to go about your day and come back to it later, then you can. So in summary, Deathloop is a really solid game. It's been getting rave reviews from some outlets, with a few 10s here and there. Now, I've certainly enjoyed my time with it so far, but it is a time investment and it's fairly complicated to pick up, so there are a bunch of barriers to entry. However, I would recommend pushing past those barriers, and then you got a game with a rich story, great feeling weapons, and a combination of PvE and PvP game modes to really keep you busy. It's also really replayable, given the nature of the loop, and probably the best game for newcomers from the library of Arcane Leon. Well, the game was developed by Arcane, it was published by Bethesda, it was released for PS5 and PC, and it was originally released on the 14th of September 2021. Well, that is it for my review of Deathloop, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. If you want to join the community, check out the Discord link in the description, or you can follow me on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.